Income tax exemption limit. Currently it is 2.5 lakhs, but of course you make use of the minimum exemption and the tax rates. Up to 5 lakh, you don't pay any tax at all. So will the government raise this minimum exemption limit? Chances are that the government will not fiddle with it, simply because, as I said, the government has said. Another thing is as far as standard deduction is concerned. So will the government bring about any changes in the standard deduction? The Aam Aadmi should be watching out for is something that interests all of us, is the personal taxation. So personal taxation as well as corporate taxes have done quite well this year. So will the FM really say, oh well, give us a pat on the back, all of us individuals, and say, I'm not going to tax you more? Because one thing that we've seen with this government, they've set great store by the fact that they want to keep the tax structure, the tax regime stable. They're not going to have quick changes. They're not going to announce increases or decreases, and that's very good because all of us like to plan on the basis of certainty. So that's what I think the Aam Aadmi should look for. One is the budget expansionary or contractionary, and then what are the kind of tax changes? Will there be any tax changes? My sense is that the government will not announce any major changes simply because this government has set store by the fact that we need to have a stable regime. So if they walk the talk, that regime will continue as far as taxes are concerned. The government in 2019-20 introduced a new tax regime for individuals. They said that you don't avail of any exemptions because, as you know, our income tax regime is riddled with so many kinds of exemptions. In fact, it becomes very difficult for ordinary people to compute our own tax, file our own tax returns. We all have to turn to chartered accountants because there are so many sections of the income tax under which you can get exemptions. So the government wanted to move away from this exemption-ridden kind of regime to one where you didn't have any exemptions at all and you could get the benefit of a slightly lower rate of taxation. Surprisingly, and perhaps from the government's point of view, somewhat unfortunately, not too many people have taken the exemption-free regime. So there is a view that since the government is keen that they want people to move to the regime without exemptions, will they tweak some of the rates over there? So that is the first thing. Will there be any changes in the earlier exemption-free regime and with the exemptions? And the second, about which there's been a lot of media reporting particularly, is as far as capital gains tax is concerned. One of the things that has kind of bedeviled our tax policy, as far as individuals at least are concerned, is that the capital gains tax varies hugely depending on the kind of asset you're holding, depending on the period for which you're holding. So that complicates matters very much. So in case you are invested in a listed equity, beyond 12 months is long term and you get taxed at a much lower rate, whereas if it is property, it is a different term, tenure which constitutes what is long term, it is a different rate of interest. So the government has been talking, and in fact we've heard the Revenue Secretary also talking about the need to rationalize, because the tax rate should not vary depending on the kind of asset, whether I hold gold or whether I hold land or whether I hold an asset which is in the form of equity or debt. That should not make a difference. Long term should be the same for all classes of assets. Similarly, the rate of taxation also should be the same. So there has been some talk of giving a uniform rate of taxation across asset classes, capital assets, and having a uniform tenure as well as rate. So that is something I think that the Aam Aadmi will be particularly interested in. So will the government bring about any changes in the standard deduction? There has been a clamor for raising this precisely because these were all limits that were set long time ago. In fact, talking about limits that were set long time ago, the government, even under the exemption regime, it has various exemptions, 1.5 lakh, for instance, for investment in PF, PPF, tax saving schemes, similarly for medical insurance, for studies. They have various limits had been set. And these were all set a long, long time ago. I think most taxpayers will be clued into, the time when these were set. So whether there's a case, given that inflation has been so high and these limits were all set about minimum about 7 to 8 years ago, is there a case for raising that limit for savings? Because after all, I'm saving. We're talking about a country where apart from the government sector and the public sector, there is no social security worth the name at all. So in that case, if somebody is willing to save for his own old age, why not allow him to save more and not limit it to just 1.5 lakhs a year. So that is something again that government perhaps could think in terms of raising. As far as housing loan is concerned, this again is another clamor where people have been saying, given the large number of houses which have been unsold, the inventory and the problems in the real estate sector, and also the need for people to kind of have a roof over their head, maybe there is a case for increasing the limit both on that interest part of it as well as on the principal part of it. So there again, I think there might be a case for government to perhaps tweak it just a little bit and see that the middle class person who's wanting to build a house, currently I think the home buyers, there's a deduction of up to 2 lakhs on annual interest of the housing loan, and there's a deduction of 1.5 for the principal amount. So maybe there is a case for increasing these limits.